The space around Kepler Station burned with the light of 1,000 suns. Laser beams cut through the darkness while plasma cannons lit up the void. Ships exploded in silent flashes, their metal bodies torn apart by weapons that could melt mountains. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Defiance, watching the battle unfold on her screens. Her brown hair was tied back tight, and her uniform bore the scars of 3 days of nonstop fighting. Around her, the crew worked at their stations with quiet focus, their faces pale but determined. "Status report," Chen called out. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his console. "We've lost 12 ships in the last hour, Admiral. The aliens keep sending more." Chen nodded grimly. The hegemony had brought everything they had to this fight. 6 different alien races working together, all wanting to wipe humanity from the galaxy. Their ships were bigger, their weapons stronger, and they had been fighting wars since before humans learned to make fire. But humans had something the aliens didn't understand. They never gave up. "All ships maintain formation," Chen spoke into her headset. "Protect the evacuation transports at all costs." On the main screen, she could see Earth's fleet spread out in a defensive line. 50,000 ships, from massive battleships to small fighters, all standing between the alien armada and the helpless civilian vessels behind them. The civilians were refugees from 3 different worlds that the hegemony had already destroyed. Admiral Zethkar of the hegemony watched from his command ship, a vessel so large it could hold an entire human city. His forearms moved over his controls while his compound eyes tracked the battle. His species, the Vortai, had conquered 50 star systems. He had never met an enemy that wouldn't run when faced with impossible odds, except the humans. "These creatures are insane," growled Commander Hexnall, a reptilian being whose scales gleamed under the bridge lights. "They know they cannot win. Why do they not retreat?" Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Because they are young and foolish. They will learn today that courage means nothing against superior firepower." The alien admiral was wrong about one thing. The humans weren't brave because they were young. They were brave because they had something worth protecting. Chen watched as another group of evacuation ships made it to the jump point. Thousands of families from 3 different species, all saved because humans were willing to die for strangers. It was exactly the kind of thing that made the older alien races call them crazy. "Admiral," called out Ensign Park from the communications station. "The Centauri defense fleet is requesting permission to retreat. They've taken heavy losses." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. The Centauri had been humanity's first real allies, blue-skinned people who valued art and science over war. They were good people, but they weren't fighters. Not like humans. "Grant their request," Chen said. "Tell them to escort the evacuation, ships to safety." "Ma'am, that leaves us without support," Torres pointed out. "We'll manage," Chen replied. She opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We knew this day might come. We knew we might have to stand alone against the darkness. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of." Across 50,000 ships, human crews prepared for what they all knew would be their last battle. In the engine rooms, young technicians kept the reactors running. On the gun decks, veterans loaded the cannons one more time. On the bridges, captains looked at photos of their families and whispered quiet goodbyes. The hegemony fleet moved forward like a wall of death. Their ships were works of art, beautiful and terrible, carrying weapons that had ended civilizations. Energy beams reached out across space, tearing into human vessels. But for every human ship that died, its crew made sure to take at least one alien ship with them. "Energy readings are off the charts," reported the ship's science officer. "Something's building up in the quantum field." Chen frowned. "What kind of something?" Before the science officer could answer, space itself began to change. The stars seemed to bend and twist. Reality rippled like water, and a sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space filled everyone's mind. On the hegemony command ship, alarms screamed. Zethkar's forearms moved frantically over his controls, but his instruments made no sense. Energy readings spiked beyond anything his sensors could measure. "What is happening?" Hexnall demanded. "Unknown," Zethkar replied, his voice tight with worry. "The quantum field is destabilizing." Then it happened. Every human ship, all 50,000 of them, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not jumped to hyperspace, just gone. One moment they were there, fighting and dying for strangers. The next moment, empty space remained where Earth's fleet had been. The alien ships drifted in the sudden silence. Weapon systems powered down as confusion spread through the hegemony fleet. Commanders shouted orders, but there was nothing to shoot at. The humans were simply gone. Zethkar stared at his screens in disbelief. His sensors showed nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that the human fleet had ever existed. The only proof of the battle was the wreckage of alien ships floating in the void. "Scan everything," he ordered. "Find them." His crew worked for hours, but there was nothing to find. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never been born. The only thing left behind were strange energy patterns that hurt to look at, quantum signatures that made no sense according to any known science. News of the disappearance spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never seen a human wondered what had happened to the crazy species that fought for others. Some celebrated, thinking the galaxy was rid of the troublesome newcomers. Others worried about what force could make an entire fleet vanish without a trace. On Earth, the homeworld of humanity, panic spread through the streets. The planet's defense grid had detected the battle, then watched helplessly as every ship in their fleet simply disappeared. Mothers cried for sons and daughters who had been there one moment and gone the next. Governments issued emergency broadcasts, but no one had answers. Dr. Maria Santos, Earth's chief scientist, stood in the planet's main observatory, staring at the data streaming in from deep space sensors. The readings made no sense. Energy patterns that violated the laws of physics, quantum distortions that suggested the impossible. "It's like they were pulled out of normal space-time," she whispered to her assistant. "But the energy required would be beyond anything we can imagine." Meanwhile, in the deep reaches of space where ancient things slept, something stirred. Old machines that had been silent for millions of years began to hum with power. Beings that had watched the galaxy grow from its birth opened eyes that had been closed since the first stars formed. The humans were gone, but their final act of courage had been noticed. Somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, Admiral Chen opened her eyes in a place that couldn't exist. Surrounded by her crew and 50,000 ships that had followed her into the impossible. But she didn't know that yet. For now, the galaxy waited and wondered what had become of the species that wouldn't run from a fight they couldn't win. 3 months had passed since the human fleet vanished from the Kepler Nexus, and the galaxy was learning what it meant to live without them. Dr. Velnara sat in her laboratory on Centauri Prime, surrounded by holographic displays showing the quantum readings from that terrible day. The blue-skinned scientist had been working 18-hour days, trying to understand what had happened to humanity's ships. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her silver hair falling loose from its usual style. "The energy patterns don't make sense," she muttered to her research assistant, a young Centauri named Colvin. "Look at this quantum signature. It's like space itself was folded and twisted, but the power needed would require the output of an entire star." Colvin studied the data with worried eyes. Could the humans have discovered some new technology? Something we didn't know about? Velnara shook her head. "Impossible. We traded scientific knowledge with them for years. They were advanced, yes, but not beyond the laws of physics." She paused, staring at the readings. Unless someone else was involved. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity's absence were becoming clear. The Kepler trade route, which humans had protected for 5 years, was now overrun with pirates. Merchant ships traveled in armed convoys, but it wasn't enough. 3 major trading companies had already declared bankruptcy. On the world of New Haven, a colony of mixed alien species faced a crisis that would have been simple to solve just months ago. A plague was spreading through the population, killing hundreds each day. The colonists had sent desperate messages across the galaxy begging for help. "The humans would have been here by now," said Governor Telmara, an elderly being whose species looked like walking trees. "They always came when people needed them." Her aide, a nervous creature covered in gray fur, shuffled his feet. Perhaps the hegemony will send aid? Telmara's bark-like skin rustled with bitter laughter. The hegemony? They only care about conquest. The humans cared about life. She was right. In the 3 months since the disappearance, not a single hegemony ship had offered help to any struggling colony. They were too busy fighting among themselves, trying to divide up the territory that humans once protected. Admiral Zethkar stood in his private chambers aboard his flagship, staring out at the stars. The victory he had expected to feel after defeating humanity never came. Instead, he felt empty. The humans were gone, but their absence left questions that kept him awake at night. His aide, a younger Vortai officer, entered with the day's reports. Admiral, the Council wants to know when we will begin colonizing the former human territories. Zethkar's compound eyes remained fixed on the starfield. Tell them we're still investigating the disappearance. We need to understand what happened before we move forward. Sir, with respect, does it matter? The humans are gone. We won. Zethkar turned his 4 arms to face his aide. Did we? They vanished in the middle of our greatest victory. What if whatever took them decides to take us next? The younger officer looked confused. Sir, you think something destroyed them? I don't know what to think, Zethkar admitted. But I've been a soldier for 300 years and I've learned to trust my instincts. Something about this feels wrong. He was right to be worried. Deep space monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge were reporting strange readings. Automated. Sensors that had watched empty space for centuries were detecting massive energy buildups in sectors where nothing should exist. Commander Yextal of the Border Patrol reviewed the reports with growing alarm. Her species, the insectoid klaxon, were known for their attention to detail. Nothing escaped their notice, which made the current situation even more disturbing. 15 monitoring stations have gone dark in the last month, she reported to her superiors. All in the outer rim sectors, no distress signals, no signs of attack. They just stopped transmitting. The response from Fleet Command was typical. Pirates, probably. Send a patrol ship to investigate when convenient. But Yextal knew it wasn't pirates. Pirates took things. These stations weren't looted or destroyed. They were simply turned off, as if something had walked up to them and flipped a switch. More disturbing were the reports from archaeological teams working on dead worlds at the galaxy's edge. Ancient ruins that had been silent for millions of years were showing signs of activity. Stone temples built by species that died before Earth's sun was born were glowing with inner light. Dr. Hexmiran, the galaxy's leading expert on ancient civilizations, received dozens of such reports each week. The scholarly being, whose species resembled walking crystals, found the pattern deeply troubling. It's as if something is waking up, he told his research team. These ruins have been dormant since the dawn of recorded history. Now suddenly, they're all becoming active at the same time. His assistant, a young mammalian being with soft gray fur, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Could it be connected to the human disappearance? Dr. Hexmiran's crystalline form sparkled with nervous energy. I don't see how it could be. The ruins predate humanity by millions of years, but the timing is suspicious. On Earth, panic had given way to desperate activity. The planet's remaining defense fleet, mostly older ships and training vessels, worked around the clock to maintain some kind of presence in human space. But everyone knew they were just buying time. President Maria Santos, Dr. Santos's sister who had been elected 2 years earlier, stood before the United Earth Assembly with dark circles under her eyes. She had aged 10 years in 3 months. We have confirmed that all 50,000 ships of our deep space fleet have vanished without trace, she announced to the packed hall. Every attempt at communication has failed. Long-range sensors show no signs of wreckage or survivors. The assembly hall was silent. Representatives from every human colony, every orbital station, every settled world sat in stunned quiet. They had known the news was bad, but hearing it officially made it real. However, President Santos continued, we will not give up hope. Our science teams are working around the clock to understand what happened. We will find them. We will bring them home. But privately, she wondered if there was anyone left to find. The quantum readings that Dr. Velnara had shared with Earth's scientists painted a picture that was hard to accept. The energy patterns suggested that the fleet hadn't been destroyed. They had been moved. But moved where? And by what? Meanwhile, in a place that existed between the spaces of normal reality, Admiral Chen walked through corridors that shouldn't exist on ships that defied all known science. She and her crew were learning things that no human had ever imagined, taught by beings so ancient that they remembered the birth of the galaxy. But the galaxy didn't know that yet. All they knew was that the species that had always stood up for the weak and helpless was gone, leaving behind only empty space and questions that had no answers. The first cracks in galactic civilization were already showing. Without humans to protect the trade routes, commerce slowed. Without human medical ships making their rounds, plague spread unchecked. Without human peacekeeping forces, old conflicts flared up again. Some species began to wonder if they had underestimated the strange creatures from the small blue world. Perhaps humans had been more important to galactic stability than anyone realized. Perhaps their disappearance wasn't something to celebrate after all. But it was too late for regrets. The humans were gone, and the galaxy would have to learn to survive without them. At least that's what everyone thought. The first warning came from the outer rim sensors, ancient machines that watched the empty space between galaxies. Lieutenant Kexanol, a young officer of the insectoid klaxon species, was working the night shift at the monitoring station when his screen suddenly lit up with impossible readings. "What in the void?" he whispered, his compound eyes focusing on the data stream. The sensors were detecting a massive fleet approaching from intergalactic space, but that was impossible. Nothing lived in the empty darkness between galaxies. He checked his instruments twice, then called his supervisor. "Commander, you need to see this. We have multiple contacts approaching at impossible speed." Commander Yextel arrived within minutes, her shell-like armor clicking as she moved quickly to the sensor station. She had been expecting something like this ever since the monitoring station started going dark. "How many ships?" she asked. "Unknown. Sir, the sensors can't get an accurate count, but based on the energy signature." Kexnall paused, rechecking his numbers. "At least 1 million vessels." Yextal felt her blood turn cold. 1 million ships was larger than the entire hegemony fleet, larger than all the galaxy's combined military forces. "What are the engine signatures? Which species builds ships like that?" Kexnall looked up with confusion in his multifaceted eyes. "That's the strange part, sir. The signatures are human." The news spread through the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. Humanity was returning, but not as anyone expected. The energy readings from their ships showed technology far beyond anything they had possessed 6 months ago. Vessels that could travel at speeds that should have torn apart the fabric of space itself. Admiral Zethkar received the report in his private quarters, and for the first time in his 300-year military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. "1 million ships?" he asked his aide, hoping he had misheard. "Yes, sir, the outer rim sensors confirm it. They're moving at incredible speed, but they're not heading for any major worlds. They're coming straight through the galaxy's edge." Zethkar's forearms moved nervously over his control surfaces. When the humans had vanished, he thought he had won the greatest victory of his career. Now he wondered if he had awakened something terrible. The first contact came 3 days later, at the Xerion system on the galaxy's rim. A hegemony patrol fleet of 20 ships encountered the advancing human armada. Captain Dekvar, an experienced Fortai officer, ordered his fleet to intercept position. "Unknown vessels. This is Captain Dekvar of the Hegemony Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately." The response came not through communication channels, but through direct action. In the space of 3 seconds, every ship in Dekvar's patrol fleet simply stopped working. Engines died, weapons powered down, life support systems reduced to minimum levels. The crews were unharmed, but their ships were as helpless as floating rocks. Then a single message broadcast on all frequencies, in perfect galactic standard. "We have returned. We wish to talk." The voice belonged to Admiral Sarah Chen. Captain. Dagvar stared at his dead control panels in shock. His ship's sensors were still working, just barely, and they showed him something that made his forearms shake. The human fleet stretched beyond the range of his instruments. Ship after ship after ship, all of them radiating power levels that his sensors couldn't properly measure. But more shocking than their numbers was their appearance. These weren't the ships that had vanished 6 months ago. These vessels were works of art, sleek and beautiful, built with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. They moved through space like living things, graceful and fluid. "Captain," his communication officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from Admiral Chen herself." Chen's image appeared on the main screen, and Dagvar gasped. She looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago. No older, no different, as if no time had passed at all. But her eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed ancient. "Captain Dagvar," she said, and somehow she knew his name. "Your crews are unharmed. Your ships will return to full function in 1 hour. Please carry this message to your superiors. Humanity requests an audience with the Galactic Council. We have much to discuss." The image faded, leaving Dagvar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically to restore their systems, but nothing responded. They could only wait, as Chen had promised, for their ship to wake up again. News of the encounter reached the major galactic powers within hours. Emergency sessions were called on every major world. The Galactic Council, a loose organization of the galaxy's most powerful species, convened for the first time in 50 years. The council met on Nexus Station, a massive orbital platform built at the intersection of 3 major trade routes. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, all talking at once about the impossible return of humanity. "How is this possible?" demanded Councillor Telvek of the Hegemony. "They vanished completely. Our best sensors found no trace of them." Dr. Velnara, now serving as the Centauri representative, stood to address the assembly. "I've analyzed the energy readings from Captain Dagvar's encounter. The technology the humans are displaying is beyond anything in our databases. They're using principles of physics that we don't understand." "Could they have found something out there?" asked Councillor Mexran, whose species looked like walking trees. "Some ancient technology in the void between galaxies?" "Or," suggested Councillor Hexnall in a grim voice, "something found them." The debate continued for hours, but no one had real answers. Finally, Council President Yeltara called for order. The elderly being, whose species had been spacefaring when most others were still primitive, raised her many arms for silence. "Speculation is useless," she declared. "We must hear what Admiral Chen has to say. If humanity wishes to talk, then we will listen." The meeting was arranged for 3 days later. Admiral Chen would address the council via hologram from her flagship, which had taken position at the galaxy's edge. The entire galaxy watched as the transmission began. Chen appeared. Before the assembly, her image crystal clear despite the vast distance. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations, but her presence filled the great hall. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. "Honored councilors," she began, "I know you have questions about our disappearance and our return. I will answer what I can." Councillor Telvek leaned forward aggressively. "Where have you been? What happened to your fleet?" Chen's expression remained peaceful. "We were invited to learn, by being so ancient that your oldest myths are recent history to them. They watched our final battle at Kepler Station and saw something they had been waiting for." "What beings?" demanded Hexnall. "Who has such power?" "They call themselves the Architects," Chen replied. "They seeded this galaxy with life billions of years ago, then stepped back to watch it grow. They have been waiting for a species that would protect others at the cost of their own lives. We passed their test." The assembly hall erupted in shocked whispers. Ancient beings, architects of life. It sounded impossible, but here was Chen, returned with a fleet that could disable any ship in seconds. President Yeltara called for order. "What do these architects want from us?" Chen's eyes grew sad. "They're leaving," moving on to seed life in other galaxies. But they're worried about what they leave behind. There are threats coming that this galaxy isn't prepared for. Dangers from other dimensions. Beings of pure entropy that consume entire realities. She paused, letting the words sink in. They asked us to stay, to protect what they built. We said yes. The silence in the assembly hall was complete. Finally, Dr. Velnara found her voice. You're saying humanity has become the galaxy's protector? Chen nodded slowly. We didn't ask for this responsibility. But when innocent people needed help, we couldn't say no. That's what made the architects choose us. Not our technology or our strength, but our willingness to sacrifice for others. Counselor, Telvek stood up angrily. And what gives you the right to make such a decision for the entire galaxy? Chen's expression remained calm, but something in her eyes made the aggressive counselor step back. The same thing that gave us the right to die for strangers at Kepler Station. We choose to protect because someone must. The architects gave us the tools to do it properly. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy's leaders in stunned silence. Outside, on a million worlds, beings who had never seen a human wondered what this meant for their future. Some feared humanity's new power. Others hoped that maybe, just maybe, the species that had always fought for the weak had returned to fight for them again. The private meeting took place on Nexus Station 3 days after Admiral Chen's address to the Galactic Council. Only 5 beings were present: Council President Yeltara, Dr. Velnara, Admiral Zethkar, and 2 other senior counselors. Chen appeared as a hologram, but her presence felt as real as if she were standing in the room. Now that we're away from the crowds, President Yeltara said, perhaps you can tell us the complete truth about what happened to your fleet. Chen nodded slowly. The truth is stranger than most of you can imagine. When our ships vanished from Kepler Station, we found ourselves in a place that exists outside normal space and time. The architects were waiting for us. She gestured, and the air around her hologram shimmered. Images appeared, showing beings of impossible beauty and age. They looked like living light, constantly shifting between forms that the mind could barely understand. They told us they had been watching our species since we first left our home world. Every time we chose to protect others instead of ourselves, they took note. Every time we risked our lives for strangers, they saw something they had been searching for across the galaxy. Dr. Velnara leaned forward, her scientific mind fascinated despite her fear. What were they searching for? Gardeners, Chen replied. The architects had spent billions of years seeding life throughout this galaxy. They guided evolution, prevented extinction events, and helped species develop intelligence. But their time here was ending. They needed to move on to other galaxies, other projects. Admiral Zethkar's 4 arms moved nervously. You said gardeners. What does that mean? Chen's expression grew serious. Every garden needs someone to tend it, to protect the plants from disease and predators, to help the weak ones grow strong. That's what they wanted from us. She waved her hand again, and new images appeared. These showed vast machines hidden in the hearts of stars, ancient stations, orbiting black holes, and devices that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They showed us the tools they had built over millions of years, technologies that could heal dying suns, stop plagues before they started, and repair damage to the very fabric of space-time itself. They offered to teach us how to use them. In exchange for what? President Yeltara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. In exchange for becoming the galaxy's protectors. Not its rulers, not its conquerors, but its guardians. They wanted us to promise that we would help any species that needed it, defend any world under threat, and prevent wars before they could start. Chen paused, and for a moment her calm mask slipped. The others could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. They didn't just offer us these tools, she continued. They gave us the knowledge to understand them. For 6 months that felt like decades. They taught us sciences that your most advanced civilizations won't discover for thousands of years. They showed us the history of the galaxy, the patterns of growth and destruction that repeat across cosmic time. Dr. Velnara asked the question that had been troubling her. If time moved differently for you, how do you look exactly the same as you did 6 months ago? Chen smiled sadly. Because we're not exactly the same. The beings you see commanding. These ships have experienced centuries of learning and growth. We remember being young and uncertain, but we've gained wisdom that comes from understanding our place in the cosmic order. She gestured to herself. This body is the same, but the mind within it has seen the birth and death of star systems. I've watched civilizations rise and fall in accelerated time chambers. I've learned languages that died out before your species developed writing. The hologram flickered as Chen accessed some unseen control. But the most important thing they taught us was about what's coming. New images appeared, and everyone in the room felt a chill of fear. These pictures showed creatures of nightmare, beings made of living darkness that consumed light itself. Stars went out in their presence, and entire solar systems simply ceased to exist. The entropy swarm, Chen said quietly. They come from other dimensions, drawn to places where life has grown too complex and bright. They've destroyed countless galaxies, consuming everything until only empty void remains. Admiral Zethkar felt his warrior's instincts screaming danger. When will they arrive? The architects weren't certain. Cosmic time is different from our time. It could be years. It could be centuries. But they will come. And when they do, nothing in this galaxy will be able to stop them. Chen's voice grew firm. Nothing except the tools and knowledge the architects left behind. President Yeltara struggled to process what she was hearing. You're saying your entire species agreed to take on this responsibility? Every human in the fleet voted, Chen replied. It wasn't a military order or a government decision. Each person chose freely, and they all chose the same thing: to protect the galaxy they had grown to love. She paused, then added with a slight smile. Though I should mention that every human in the fleet now includes a lot more people than it did 6 months ago. The architects had been collecting the consciousnesses of worthy beings from across the galaxy for millions of years. Beings who had died protecting others, who had sacrificed themselves for strangers. Dr. Velnara gasped. You mean the heroes of 1,000 species, stored in quantum matrices and waiting for the right time to return. The architects gave them new bodies, human bodies, and asked if they wanted to join us. Most said yes. Chen's hologram gestured toward the vast fleet waiting at the galaxy's edge. That's why we have 1,000,000 ships instead of 50,000. We're not just humans anymore. We're everyone who ever chose to put others before themselves. The implications hit them like a physical blow. 1,000,000 ships crewed by the greatest heroes in galactic history, all working together under human leadership. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What about the rest of the galaxy? Asked one of the other counselors. What happens to our governments, our military forces? Chen's expression grew gentle. Nothing changes unless you want it to. We're not here to conquer or rule. We're here to help. If you have wars you can't stop, we'll stop them. If you have plagues you can't cure, we'll cure them. If you have disasters you can't handle, we'll handle them. And if we refuse your help? Admiral Zethkar asked, though he already suspected the answer. Then we'll leave you alone, Chen replied, simply. But we won't let you harm innocent beings. We won't let you start wars of conquest or commit genocide. Those days are over. The room fell silent as the weight of humanity's new role settled over them. The species they had once considered, young and reckless, had become something far beyond their understanding. Gardeners of the galaxy, protectors of all life, wielding technology that bordered on magic. There's one more thing, Chen said softly. The architects left a message for the galaxy's leaders. They wanted me to share it with you. Her hologram changed, and suddenly an ancient voice spoke through her. Words that carried the weight of cosmic ages. Children of the galaxy, your time of growth is ending, and your time of responsibility is beginning. We have watched you learn to reach for the stars, and now we watch you learn to protect them. The humans will guide you, but the choice to grow or stagnate remains yours. Choose wisely, for the darkness between the stars has noticed your light. When the message ended, Chen returned to normal. That's all I can tell you for now. We'll be positioning our ships throughout the galaxy over the next few months. You probably won't see us unless you need us, but we'll be watching. Protecting. Helping where we can. The hologram began to fade. And remember, we're still human at heart. We still believe that every life matters, that every species deserves a chance to grow and thrive. That hasn't changed, even if everything else has. As Chen's image disappeared, the 5 most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence. Outside the station's windows, the stars looked the same as they always had. But everyone in the room knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The age of human protection had begun. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chen's revelation to the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was learning to live in a new age. Human ships appeared wherever trouble stirred, not as conquerors but as protectors, just as Chen had promised. Animes. The mining world of Kepler 442b, a labor dispute that had been brewing for years, suddenly ended when human mediators arrived. They didn't take sides or impose solutions. Instead, they simply helped both parties understand each other's needs, and within days a fair agreement was reached that satisfied everyone. Governor Rextal, whose people had been on the verge of civil war, stood watching human engineers install new safety equipment in the deepest mines. The technology was beyond anything his species had ever imagined, but the humans shared it freely. "I still don't understand," he told Captain Martinez, the human officer overseeing the operation. "What do you gain from helping us?" Captain Martinez, a woman who looked young but whose eyes held centuries of wisdom, smiled gently. "We gain a galaxy where people don't have to die in unsafe mines, where families don't have to worry about their loved ones coming home. That's enough for us." Similar scenes played out across 1,000 worlds. On the plague-stricken colony of New Haven, human medical ships arrived with cures that seemed like miracles. Diseases that had killed for generations simply vanished under the touch of human healing technology. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the human medical officers, worked alongside local doctors to teach them the new techniques. "The important thing," she explained to Governor Telmara, "is that you learn to do this yourselves. We won't always be here." Telmara's bark-like skin rustled with gratitude. "But you'll come if we call?" Dr. Kim nodded. "Always. That's what we promised." Not everyone welcomed humanity's new role. In the Hegemony Council chambers, Admiral Zethkar faced growing criticism from his own people. "They make us look weak," complained Commander Hexnall. "Every time there's trouble, the humans solve it before we can even respond. Our military looks useless." Zethkar turned his forearms toward his subordinate. "And how many of our people have died in the last 6 months compared to the previous year?" Hexnall paused, calculating. "Well, almost none. But nothing." Zethkar interrupted. "The humans do what we never could. They prevent wars instead of fighting them. They heal instead of conquering. Maybe it's time we learned from them instead of resenting them." The real test came when the first extra-dimensional incursion occurred, exactly as the architects had warned. It began in the Omega Sector, a region of space known for its dangerous asteroid fields and criminal hideouts. Long-range sensors detected something impossible, a tear in space itself, growing larger by the hour. Dr. Velnara was among the first to analyze the readings. "It's a dimensional rift," she reported to the emergency council session. "Something is coming through from another reality." What came through defied description. Beings of pure entropy, creatures that existed to consume order and life. They looked like living shadows with too many angles, shapes that hurt to look at directly. Wherever they touched, matter simply ceased to exist. The first system they encountered was uninhabited, but within hours, 3 planets and their star were gone, not destroyed, not consumed, simply gone, leaving empty space behind. Panic spread through the nearby sectors. The combined fleets of 5 different species moved to intercept, but their weapons were useless. Energy beams passed through the creatures without effect. Physical missiles dissolved before making contact. Entire battle groups vanished as if They had never existed. Then the human ships arrived. Admiral Chen's flagship, the New Dawn, emerged from hyperspace at the head of a fleet that seemed to glow with inner light. The vessels moved in perfect formation, their hulls shimmering with energy patterns that made reality itself more stable. "This is Admiral Chen to all ships," her voice broadcast across all frequencies. "Withdraw to safe distance. We'll handle this." The human ships didn't attack the entropy beings directly. Instead, they surrounded the dimensional rift and began to sing. It was the only way to describe the sound they made, a harmonic frequency that resonated through space itself. Captain Dekvar, now commanding a hegemony observation post, watched in amazement as the human ships worked. "What are they doing?" His science officer, a young Vortai who had studied human tactics, shook his head in wonder. "They're not fighting the creatures. They're healing the damage they cause. Look at the readings." On his screens, Dekvar could see reality itself being repaired. Where the entropy beings had left empty void, the human ships were restoring matter and energy. Stars that had been consumed flickered back into existence. Planets that had never been formed into being. But more than that, they were closing the dimensional rift itself. The tear in space began to shrink as the human fleet's harmonic song grew stronger. The entropy beings, sensing their connection to their home dimension being severed, began to retreat. Within hours, the rift was sealed, and the last of the creatures had been driven back to their own reality. Where a dead system had been, new worlds now orbited a young star, clean and beautiful and ready for life to take hold. Admiral Chen's hologram appeared on Dekvar's bridge. She looked tired but satisfied. "Captain, I need you to spread the word. This was just the beginning. The barriers between dimensions are weakening and more incursions will come, but we'll be ready for them." "How did you do that?" Dekvar asked in amazement. "How did you bring back what was destroyed?" Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked like the same young admiral who had vanished at Kepler Station. "The architects taught us that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. We learned to flip it." News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The impossible had been done. Beings of pure entropy had been defeated, and reality itself had been healed. The human fleet hadn't just protected the galaxy. They had shown that even the most fundamental forces of destruction could be overcome. In her private quarters aboard the New Dawn, Admiral Chen made her final log entry about the incident. Personal log, Admiral Sarah Chen. "Today we faced our first real test as Guardians of the Galaxy. The entropy swarm sent scouts through a dimensional weak point, probably testing our defenses. We passed the test, but just barely." She paused, looking out at the stars through her viewport. In the distance, she could see the new system they had created, its planets already showing the first signs of atmospheric development. "I think the architects were right to choose us, not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we understand what it means to protect something precious. Every human in this fleet has lost people they loved. We know what it costs to lose what matters." She smiled, remembering Earth and the family she had left behind. "But we also know what it's worth to save what can be saved. The galaxy is full of life, full of beauty, full of beings who just want to live and grow and find happiness. That's worth protecting. That's worth everything." In the months that followed, the pattern continued. Human ships appeared wherever they were needed, not as conquerors but as helpers. Wars ended before they could start. Plagues were cured before they could spread. Natural disasters were prevented or quickly repaired. The galaxy began to change. Species that had been enemies for centuries started working together, following humanity's example. Trade flourished as piracy disappeared under human protection. Science advanced as human teachers shared knowledge freely. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy saw itself. For the first time in recorded history, the various species began to think of themselves as one people, all part of the same great garden that needed tending. Former enemies approached human vessels not with fear, but with requests for help, guidance, and friendship. Children of a dozen different species learned to work together on human-sponsored projects. Artists and scientists from across the galaxy collaborated on works that celebrated their shared existence. Admiral Chen often thought about the architects and their final gift to humanity. Not just the tools to protect the galaxy, but the wisdom to know when and how to use them. They hadn't returned as conquerors or rulers. They had become what the galaxy needed most. Gardeners, tending the vast garden of life with patience, skill, and endless love. The galaxy was in good hands and everyone knew it. The age of fear and conflict was ending, replaced by something better, an age of growth, cooperation, and hope. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, ancient beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall for billions of years smiled their approval. Their greatest experiment had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Humanity had kept its promise.